Back in the day, safety wasn't even on the blueprint. These 12 American rides looked slick, but behind the wheel, you were basically gambling with your life. No airbags, paper-thin metal, gas tanks ready to blow, and handling so bad it felt like driving a shopping cart at 80 miles per hour. They weren't cars, they were rolling obituaries.
Click the subscribe button. This is the channel where you will find rare and incredible facts about cars.
Number 12. All right, folks, let's take a spin back to 1978 and talk about the Ford Fairmont. The car that was supposed to be Ford's answer to the gas crisis, but ended up feeling more like a budget rental special you'd get stuck with on vacation. The Fairmont was marketed as affordable, practical, and efficient. Translation? It was cheap, boxy, and about as exciting as a microwave oven. Slide behind the wheel, and you'd swear Ford cut corners just to see how little they could get away with. Thin sheet metal, plastic everywhere, and driving dynamics that made you feel like you were piloting a rolling tin can with hubcaps. Seatbelts? Yeah, technically there, but safety optional was the real vibe. Under the hood, you weren't getting much muscle either. The base 4-cylinder wheezed out horsepower like a tired asthmatic. The 6-cylinder? Slightly better, but calling it sporty would have been a crime. Let's just say merging onto the highway in a Fairmont was less zoom zoom and more, please Lord, let this thing get to 60 before the semi does. And don't even get me started on the styling. It was square, beige, and boring, like a refrigerator on wheels. If you parked it next to a wall, it practically disappeared. Nobody ever turned their head and said, "Whoa, nice Fairmont," unless they were being sarcastic. But hey, credit where it's due. The Fairmont was cheap, it sold well, and it got families from point A to point B eventually. It was the definition of basic transportation in the late 70s. Just don't expect it to stir your soul, unless the soul stirring comes from rattling panels and the fear of a crash test. In short, the 1978 Ford Fairmont was like that plain white bread at the grocery store. It filled the void, kept you alive, but no one ever bragged about it. Number 11. Let's rewind to 1967 when Chevrolet unleashed the first ever Camaro, their big answer to Ford's Mustang. Now don't get me wrong, this thing looked mean. Long hood, short deck, V8 under the lid. It screamed street machine. And yeah, it had plenty of speed. But here's the kicker. Chevy apparently forgot that fast cars need good brakes. Early-run Camaros had this nasty little habit of going like a rocket and then stopping like a shopping cart with busted wheels. Drum brakes all around meant you could mash that pedal to the floor and it still felt like you were praying to every deity you knew just to slow down. Folks would say the Camaro didn't have brakes, it just had a delayed stop feature. And because of that, accidents were way too common. You had kids flying around town in these hot-looking coupes, punching it at green lights, then white-knuckling it when a red light came up quicker than they expected. Let's just say a lot of insurance adjusters got real busy in '67. But here's the thing, the Camaro still won hearts. It was stylish, affordable, and it had that muscle car swagger people wanted. Yeah, the brakes were sketchy, but that didn't stop buyers from lining up. People shrugged and said, hey, stopping's overrated anyway. It's the going fast that counts. Classic 60s logic. So, the 1967 Chevy Camaro was a legend in the making. A beautiful, powerful, slightly dangerous beast that showed Chevy was ready to brawl with the Mustang. Just don't forget, behind the wheel, you needed guts, reflexes, and probably a whole lot of luck. Number 10. The 1974 Plymouth Volare, Chrysler's big idea for a new small car. On paper, it was supposed to be modern, efficient, and the answer to America's gas crisis prayers. In reality, well, let's just say this thing was about as sturdy as a folding lawn chair in a tornado. The Volare rolled off the line with promises of smooth rides and sleek styling, but the truth hit owners faster than a pothole in Detroit. The build quality? Flimsy at best. Doors rattled, trim fell off, and the thing was rusting before some buyers even got it home from the dealership. You didn't wash your Volare, you just hoped the rain wouldn't melt it. And then came the recalls. Oh boy. The Volare practically lived at the dealer's service bay. Brakes failed, carburetors coughed, suspension parts gave up the ghost. It was like the car had commitment issues with staying on the road. Folks started calling it the Recall King, because if something could go wrong, it usually did. But here's the kicker. Plymouth still managed to sell a bunch of these things. Why? Because in the mid-70s, buyers were desperate for something affordable and modern-looking. So people drove off the lot thinking they'd scored a deal, only to find themselves broken down on the shoulder with the hood up, muttering, "Well, there goes another Saturday." Looking back, the Volare is a poster child of the malaise era. Good intentions, bad execution, and a reputation that tanked faster than its resale value. If you owned one, you didn't just have a car, you had a part-time job keeping it running. Want me to give this one the same treatment as a mock used car ad style roast too? Could be funny, like, "For sale, Volare, comes with free tow truck number." Number 9. All right, folks, buckle up. Or rather don't, because in 1965, the Ford Galaxy 500 didn't even come with seat belts as standard. This beast was less a car and more a rolling brick of steel, with a V8 that could outrun just about anything, except maybe common sense. The Galaxy 500 was all about size and speed. You wanted cubic inches under the hood? Ford said, "How many would you like?" You could stuff it with a 427 big block, and suddenly you weren't just driving, you were launching a small moon down Main Street. And handling? Let's just say if you took a corner too quick, you were gonna learn real fast why they called it a land yacht. Now here's where things get spicy. This monster had zero safety features, no airbags, no crumple zones, not even proper seat belts in a lot of cases. If you got in a wreck, it was basically car versus car, and whoever had the heavier ride usually walked away. They called it the Galaxy, but in reality, it was more like a steel missile. One wrong move and you were headed for orbit. And visibility? Forget about it. The hood was about as long as a bowling alley, and if you parallel parked it, you deserved a medal. These things weren't built for tight city streets. They were made for drag strips, highways, and showing off at the drive-in. But here's the funny part. Folks back then didn't even think of it as unsafe. It was just a man's car. Big, loud, thirsty, and guaranteed to make your neighbors jealous. Nobody worried about safety ratings. They just worried if they could smoke the guy in the next lane. So, the 1965 Galaxy 500 wasn't really banned, but today it sure feels like a relic from another planet. It was all muscle, no mercy, and about as subtle as a marching band in your living room. Number 8. The Dodge Aspen 1977 Goda seemed like a winner. Compact size, smooth ride, and supposedly modern engineering. But in reality, this thing was about as reliable as a dollar store alarm clock. First, let's deal with the elephant in the room, rust. The Aspen didn't just rust, it practically melted. You bought one in '77, and by '78, the fenders looked like Swiss cheese. Car washes weren't maintenance, they were a death sentence. If you lived somewhere with snow, salt, or even morning dew, you were essentially driving on a rolling tetanus shot. And then came the suspension problems. The suspension now has to keep your car stable, smooth, and planted. But the Aspen setup made it sway like it had too much beer. Hit a pothole, the front end would shake like a hula dancer. Try keeping it level on the highway? Forget it. You played tug-of-war with the steering wheel the whole way home to Grandma's house. The government had to step in and recall the cars, a ton of them. In fact, the Aspen became one of the poster children for Detroit's quality control problems in the late '70s. Chrysler touted it as America's new small car, but drivers quickly realized it was more of a new headache on four wheels. The worst part? It wasn't even that much fun. Sure, you could opt for a V8, but most Aspens came with wheezy sixes that struggled to accelerate. Imagine being stopped at a green light and the driver behind you in a Pinto honking because your Dodge just won't go away. That's life in Aspen. So the 1977 Dodge Aspen was proof that brilliant marketing can't hide shoddy engineering. It promised modern reliability, but delivered rust, recalls, and a suspension so bad that every drive was a circus performance. The Aspen was a wreck in a good suit. Number 7. The 1975 Chevy Vega. Now, on paper, this car was supposed to be Chevy's knight in shining armor. Small, lightweight, stylish, and cheap. GM promised it was the compact to save America from gas prices and imports. But in reality, the Vega had all the staying power of a paper umbrella in a hurricane. Let's start with the engine, the aluminum four-banger that GM bragged about like it was the second coming of horsepower. Problem is, it was more like the second coming of headaches. These engines overheated, warped, and seized up faster than you could say tow truck. In fact, some Vegas barely made it past 40,000 miles before the motor just gave up and said, "Nope, I'm done." People used to joke that a Vega engine could die before the warranty paperwork dried. Then there was the rust problem. Now, every car in the '70s rusted, but the Vega? It didn't rust, it disintegrated. Park it outside in the rain and you'd come back to find flakes of your fenders blowing away in the breeze. Folks called it the disposable car, like Chevy built it out of soda cans and good intentions. And don't even get me started on the ride quality. Driving a Vega was like sitting on a lawn chair strapped to a shopping cart. If you hit a pothole, the whole car rattled like a maraca. It wasn't so much a vehicle as it was a mobile disappointment. Chevy tried to fix things with recalls, patches, and even extended warranties, but by then the damage was done. Word got out, and suddenly the Vega's reputation was toast. Buyers realized that if you wanted a small car that would actually last, you went Japanese. So here's the moral of the story. The 1975 Chevy Vega was Detroit's lesson in overpromising and under-delivering. It looked sporty. The Vega wasn't a car. It was a money pit with wheels. Number 6. The 1960 Dodge Dart. The early Darts were cheap, compact sedans aimed at the budget-conscious driver. But man, did they come with strings attached. First off, rust. You'd think dart meant fast, but the only thing darting through this car was corrosion. Frame, floorboards, wheel wells, all eating themselves alive before you even hit 5 years on the road. Rain, snow, salt on the streets, forget about it. Then there was the handling, or lack thereof. The Dart drove like a sofa strapped to a lawnmower. Tight turns? Forget it. Emergency stops? Hope you enjoy that slight tilt and slide experience. Let's just say it was no friend to anyone who liked to drive with confidence. And oh yeah, seat belts were optional because safety in the early 60s was more of a suggestion than a rule. You were basically rolling around in a tin pan with minimal protection, trusting luck and reflexes more than engineering. In short, the early Dodge Dart was a triple threat: rust, sloppy handling, and bare-bones safety. A real buyer beware special. Number 5. The 1970 AMC Gremlin, a quirky little American hatchback that looked like it had literally been cut in half. AMC marketed it as a fun, affordable compact car, a small car for an era of muscle-hungry muscle. But what was it really like? Well, let's just say the Gremlin earned a reputation as a death trap on wheels. The short wheelbase made for twitchy handling, the suspension was as bouncy as a trampoline, and the short rear overhangs meant it could spin out of a corner before you could ask, "What the hell?" Under the hood, the Gremlin wasn't half bad. You could order a V8, but the tiny body and high center of gravity made even small turns feel like a thrilling sport. And let's not forget the styling. AMC was going for something different, but to many, it was a chopped-up car with a bad haircut. Despite all this, the Gremlin has developed a cult following. The car was a weird little rascal, fun to look at, iffy to drive, and unforgettable on the road. Number 4. The 1953 Chevrolet Bel Air with Power Glide, a car that looked classy on the outside but had the safety tech of a roller skate with a prayer. Chevy pitched it as the modern family car: smooth automatic transmission, shiny chrome, and plenty of curb appeal. But once you got behind the wheel, reality hit, and it hit hard. The brakes? Weak as watered-down coffee. Stomping on them was more of a suggestion than a command, and stopping distances were about as long as a minor novel. Add to that the fact that in 1953, safety features meant, well, nothing. No seatbelts, no airbags, no crumple zones. Basically, you were riding in a steel shoebox, and if anything went wrong, you were the crumple zone. Now, don't get me wrong, the Bel Air had charm. The Power Glide Automatic made driving easy, and the styling made folks feel like movie stars. But at the end of the day, cruising one of these was like dating a heartbreaker. Gorgeous, exciting, but bound to get you in trouble sooner or later. The 53 Bel Air was a rolling hazard with style. A car that made you look good, right up until it didn't stop in time. Number 3. Let's shine the spotlight on the 1976 Ford Mustang II, the pony car that showed up dressed like a champ but fought like a chump. On paper, it had the Mustang name, the sporty looks, and a marketing pitch straight out of Detroit's playbook: small, efficient, stylish. But once you got it rolling, especially on the highway, you realized this ride was all sizzle, no steak. See, the Mustang II looked the part, but under the hood, you were lucky if it had a four-banger that wheezed louder than a kid's go-kart. Even the V6 option didn't exactly set your hair on fire. And the brakes? Lord have mercy. Try stopping this thing at 65 miles an hour, and you'd better start praying early, because those drums were basically two metal dinner plates rubbing against each other. Highways felt less like driving and more like gambling. To make matters worse, Ford tried to jazz it up with trims like the Ghia, padded roofs, plush seats, even opera windows. But all that lipstick couldn't hide the fact that this Mustang had lost its muscle. It was like taking Muhammad Ali and telling him to fight wearing oven mitts. Sure, it looked sporty, but when push came to shove, it was just another underpowered, sketchy little box from the 70s malaise era. The 1976 Mustang II was a poser, a car that strutted down Main Street like it owned the joint, but when it came time to run with the big dogs, it wheezed, slipped, and braked like a shopping cart with a bad wheel. Number 2. The 1960 Chevrolet Corvair, the car that proved sometimes different doesn't mean better. On paper, the Corvair was a cool idea. Rear engine, air-cooled, European-style handling, basically Chevy trying to play Volkswagen's game. But once you actually got behind the wheel, man, this thing handled like a drunk shopping cart with a busted wheel. You never quite knew where it was gonna wander, left, right, or straight into somebody's mailbox. Now the big problem was weight distribution. With the engine sitting in the back and those skinny tires up front, it didn't take much for the Corvair to fishtail like a greased-up hog on ice. Throw in some fast cornering, and you were suddenly auditioning for Dukes of Hazzard without meaning to. Ralph Nader, the consumer crusader himself, saw this rolling circus act and said, "Nope, not today." His book, Unsafe at Any Speed, basically turned the Corvair into America's automotive punching bag. And here's the kicker. Chevy tried to sell it as a stylish, affordable family car. Imagine mom, dad, and 2 kids loading up the groceries, only to discover that one sharp turn could flip them like pancakes at a diner. Not exactly the safe and sensible suburban dream. The 1960 Corvair was a heartbreaker and a widowmaker all in one. Cool looks, but once it hit the streets, it was about as stable as a barfly at closing time. No wonder it went down in history as Ralph Nader's personal nightmare and America's cautionary tale. Number 1. The 1970s. The 1971 Ford Pinto. Now on the outside, the Pinto looked like your average, no-frills bargain basement compact. Cheap, cheerful, and about as exciting as a soggy cornflake. But here's the catch. Rear end this little guy, and you weren't just in a fender bender. You were suddenly starring in your very own 4th of July fireworks show. See, Ford put the gas tank in a spot so sketchy, one little bump from behind could turn your Pinto into a rolling Roman candle. And Ford knew about it too, but fixing it would have cost a few bucks more per car. So they basically said, let it ride, what could go wrong? Spoiler alert, a lot went wrong. Court cases, lawsuits, and a reputation so bad, the Pinto's name is still practically shorthand for death trap on wheels. And the irony? People bought these things thinking they were getting safe, practical transportation. Families, teenagers, college kids, everybody. You'd load up your groceries in the trunk, but deep down, you were really hauling around a Molotov cocktail with seatbelts. The 71 Pinto was cheap, slow, and straight up dangerous. It wasn't just a car, it was a coin toss between getting to work and becoming a roadside barbecue. If the Pinto taught us anything, it's this. Sometimes that great deal in the showroom is just a lawsuit with hubcaps.